So, good afternoon YouTube, Len Scapoff here. This is going to be my first vlog, assuming two things. One, that I've got the camera angle right and you're not looking now at my tom-tom or the road in front of me or clear blue sky. Well, actually you wouldn't be able to see clear blue sky because it's yet another miserable overcast day in what we laughingly call summer in Northern Europe. And secondly, it depends on whether the mic setup is right, because my full face helmet reached its use by date last year, which I forgot about, and I've decided that I'm not going to waste a 15 quid helmet mount on a camera that I'm binning. So I've got this attached to my showy J-wing, which is an open face with a full visor, as you may be able to tell if I've got the camera angle right. The camera is a Contour Roam 2. It's been modded to take an external microphone. See my previous vids on that. So I'm not going to just keep talking to you about the camera or the microphone. I'm going to assume that all is well, and we'll find something else to talk about. History. One of my subscribers at least likes a bit of history. So this big house here on the right, well, that was the home of the writer Marjorie Allingham between 1929 and I think it was 1962. What's that? Who's Marjorie Allingham? Well might you ask, because she's not particularly well read these days. But back in the so-called golden age of detective fiction, Marjorie Allingham was one of the four queens of crime. The other three were Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, and the New Zealand author Ngaio Marsh. Now, of course you've heard of Agatha Christie. Are you coming or not? Not. But you may not have heard of the other three. Dorothy L. Sayers, as well as being a well thought of theologian at the time, was a copywriter by trade, and she was one of the team that came up with the Guinness Toucan campaign back in the 30s. But she also wrote the Lord Peter Wimsey novels, and those of you who watched the 1970s television series with Ian Carmichael, or the 80s version with Edward Petherbridge, will know of whom I speak. Ngaio Marsh read about a number of detectives, but her principal character was a guy called Detective Inspector Allen, spelt Alain, but pronounced Allen. He was as was almost de rigueur at the time, an upmarket, an upper crust policeman. Marjorie Allingham wrote about Albert Campion, and those of you who are old enough or have seen the reruns will remember, or may remember, the 1989-90 television series called Campion, with Peter Davidson in the eponymous role. Curiously enough, there were four queens, or so-called queens of crime, and this corner of Essex owned two of them, or claimed two of them, as well as Marjorie Allingham back there in Tolston Darcy. Dorothy L. Sayers lived about 8 miles down the road in Witham. And there's a little statue of Dorothy L. Sayers opposite our old home down there, which, who knows, one day, should this system ever work, I might show you on one of my little runabouts. Now this is just intended to be a short run, so I can get back to the laptop and check out this video, or promptly delete it. So there isn't going to be an awful lot around here of interest to show you. Typical sort of English country corner. Rose and Crown still going. There used to be 2 pubs in this village. The other one was the sort of sawdust and beer out of barrels kind of place that had probably been around for a couple of centuries, but the landlords there finally gave up the ghost and no one thought it was worth resurrecting it, so it was converted, as so many pubs are being these days, back into a private dwelling. The only other thing of interest that I'm likely to be able to show you on this run is coming up shortly. Just remember that I'm in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, now I'm in a 50. When I first moved to this area and I mentioned this village that's coming up, Tiptree, people said to me, oh yeah, where the jam comes from. Well, I hadn't a clue what they were talking about. I thought, these are Robinsons on a branch in a place called Tiptree. But of course I was merely betraying my plebeian roots, because this is the home of Wilkin and Sons, jam makers to royalty, by appointment, etc., etc. Its products are excellent, and of course, since I'm local, I try to eat as many of them as I possibly can. And this is a business that is almost 50% owned by the workforce. The shares, just under 50% of the shares are held in trust for the employees. And Peter Wilkin, who is I'm not sure if he's the great-grandson or the grandson of the founder, is the last surviving member of the family, I understand. And he has indicated that he's going to leave his shares on his death to the trust, so that following his demise, the company will be owned wholly by the workforce. And that's a good thing. And what's particularly good for them is the fact that such is the demand for their products right now that they've just got planning consent to build a new factory, because that old Victorian building can no longer accommodate the volumes that they need to produce to meet demand. And in conjunction with building a new factory, sorry, I'm pausing because I can see traffic stationary up ahead, which doesn't bode well. They're going to build a couple of hundred new houses, new dental surgery, and some public, other public amenities. Thank you, good sir. Oh, it's the bin men. Nah, it's the dustbin men. Now the bike I'm riding is a Triumph Thunderbird 900, which I've had now for just over 10 years, bought it new. Don't ride it a lot, bit top heavy, it's covered in bling, and to be honest with you, I bought it because, as much as anything else, it was a complete work of art. It still is a complete work of art. I don't think that your Michelangelos, even on their best days, could have sculpted something that looks as good as this. And over the years I've thought about changing it for something else. People say to me, oh, you should go and get a Triumph Bonneville, or something of that kind. But I test rode a Triumph Bonneville once, and I thought it was a bit, well, I don't want to offend Triumph Bonneville owners, but it was a little bit lacklustre compared to this. Not that I'm Not that I'm anything of a squid when riding this. But I've made a New Year's resolution. Well, I've made a New Year's resolution in May that I was going to get out and ride this more, but of course the bloody weather in this country is so fucking appalling most of the time, and I really haven't been able to summon up the enthusiasm. And notwithstanding the fact that we're approaching the middle of June, as you can see, it's still looking overcast. We had a couple of sunny days, quite warm, but the difficulty with that in this country is you never know whether that in fact is going to turn out to have been your summer. It's an absolute bastard of a junction, this. No one will give way to anyone, and you, my friend, just need to get your fucking finger out and get round it. Probably the worst bit of cornering I've done in a very long time. So this is the return leg. So chances are, I hope that smell of burning is coming from someone's bonfire and not from mine. So far, I've talked about very little, but once I get back and check out how well this has turned out and make any necessary adjustments, I'll get out and do a few more. I might even get out and do one for MT8 on the subject of the inadequacies of action cams for the purposes of moto bloggers. So until then, dear viewer, be thoughtful out there, and if you can't be thoughtful, best be lucky. Seeing you.